Now we have this panel discussion on the same topic, how to protect critical national infrastructure. And the panelist for this panel discussion, by the way, this panel discussion is itself very unique because only the moderator and one panelist going to be here physically present, and the rest of the panelists are joining from different locations. Two are from Karachi, and two are from, one is from Singapore and one is from UK. From UK we have the same gentleman Habib Khan, and then from Singapore we have Shafiq Dawood from Group IB. So the Mr. Amar Hussain Jafri is the panelist for this panel discussion, and I myself am the moderator. Actually, the moderator was supposed to be somebody else, but he could not travel to Islamabad, so I'm supposed to do it. So let's start, and if we have the panelists ready from their locations. Or we need mics here. दो mics दे दें दोनों को. So we have with us hello.
Hello. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello. Yes.
Hello.
So besides Mr. Amar Jafri, we have with us, as I mentioned, Shafiq Dawood from Group IB Singapore, and Mr. Habib Khan from UK, and we have Mr. Inamullah Siddiqui, who is the Director IT and Cybersecurity with K Electric. He is joining us, and he has joined us from Karachi. He is the gentleman at your left top of the screen. And then we have Mr. Asif Menai, General Manager and Chief Information Security Officer of the largest bank of Pakistan, the Habib Bank. He is the gentleman at the right bottom of the screen. And then above him we have Habib Khan, and at the left bottom we have Mr. Shafiq Dawood from Group IB. Thank you very much, all of you gentlemen, for joining us. And obviously the stage is well set that what critical network infrastructure is. So to start the panel discussion, actually, my first question to Amar Jafri Saab is that how many sectors or industries in Pakistan are critical, or can be said that these are critical network infrastructure of the country?
Thank you, Amarji. This is a very important topic. I know we are sandwiched between the lunch and this session. So we'll try to be brief. Hello. 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 ठीक है जी. Right जी. इसी होटल में I think 15 years before ब्रूस से किसी ने पूछा था कि व्हाट इज परफेक्ट सिक्योरिटी. उसने कहा था 2 inches of air, डोंट कनेक्ट. सो मेकिंग द कनेक्शन with internet is our issue. We have to do it. Since morning I am thinking a slang like fix it or face it. So either we'll have to fix it or we'll have to face it. Now coming back to your question, to my understanding, the definition of critical infrastructure is different for different countries, different for different eras. Maybe 3 years back, 5 years back, it would have been some like the, what is the definition of critical infrastructure? Anything which incapacitates the functionality of a state. Functionality of a state, let me repeat, that is critical infrastructure. Or anything, if it is damaged, spoils everything around it. The critical infrastructure. I think 10 years before, the definition was only something like atomic infrastructure, like some dams or some WAPDA, something like this. Today, maybe it's Nadra, let me be very frank. Just think for a minute, Nadra system is not working. Your entire airport system will collapse because that is linked with identification. Your passport will not be issued. Think for a minute about your banking system, fintech, about your payment systems. You know, billions of rupees are being transferred from one point to a point B in a country through these mobile transfers. So how many people will be affected? It's a big issue. There was a time when critical infrastructure was under threat. Like if we take the example of StaxNet, it was not hacked from outside. It was totally isolated. That was purely a USB attack by the insider. You know that. So the definition of critical infrastructure, to my understanding, is different from different eras. Today, if I feel a real threat is to our industry now, after 2 to 3 years down the road, our industry has to go to IR 4.0. They do not have any choice, let me be very frank. You can't stop time and technology. It has to go. So my understanding is that we should now focus on 3 things. IIoT, industrial IoTs, it's not IoT, it's industrial IoTs. Our industrial infrastructures, powered by some AI-based strategies. So this is my brief response. If there will be some question, I can go in details. Thank you.
Uh, Inam, since you are working in K Electric and previously you have worked in the financial sector as well, what is your take on this, that how many sectors can be designated as critical sectors in Pakistan? As we know that in UK they have declared 13 sectors to be critical. In USA they have declared 18 sectors to be declared as critical. And in UAE, they recently in 2019, they declared 8 of their sectors as critical. So understanding the definition from Amar Jafri Saab that anything that incapacitate the state, anything that disrupt the society can be termed as critical network infrastructure. So what is your take from utility point of view or from financial sector point of view, that what should be designated as critical in Pakistan?
So yes, Asif, the definition is spot on actually, and the enormous impact the sectors that could have on our national infrastructure and national security and compromise national security. It could be our communications, could be dams and water sector, our NDMA, which is emergency services, our energy, which I'm part of, sector, financial services, even food and agriculture, because of the COVID-19, the focus is moving from globalization now again back to regionalization or localization. Government facilities. We talk about healthcare these days a lot. That has an enormous impact on national security. We talk about information technology, our nuclear assets, and transportation. So these are our key areas and critical sectors that are part of critical infrastructure and have an enormous impact on national security.
Habib, Inam just mentioned that food sector is or can be declared as a critical network infrastructure. Obviously, food security is an important item, but what is the significance of this food sector from cyber security point of view? Habib Saab, if you can respond to this.
Assalamu alaikum. Some good points made regarding some of the definitions around critical infrastructure, and I agree that these can change with time. There are always going to be some that remain pretty constant. So anything really essentially that's classed as essential services or impacts national security or defence functioning of the state will always be included. And food is often one of those sectors that is classed as an essential service. However, a good example of a sector that isn't traditionally classified as critical national infrastructure, but in many nations this year has entered temporarily the definition of critical national infrastructure. For example, pharmaceuticals with regards to COVID and vaccine production. So in some countries, the pharma industry, which isn't normally considered critical national infrastructure, has become critical national infrastructure because of the vaccine research going underway. So we can see from that example that from time to time, the definition of what is critical and national interest can change according to circumstances.
Thank you. And it means that it's when we say that a sector is critical, so it is not necessary that we are saying it from automation point of view. A critical infrastructure can be threatened physically and can be threatened virtually, and the assets can be physical as well as virtual. Is that what we are agreeing on? Anybody who wants to say on this? I mean, are we saying that supply chain for pharmaceutical companies or for the food sector, how can we transport the harvest from the fields to the urban centers? So are we saying that supply chain and the transportation is also critical because it supports many industries, yet they are not that much automated?
I think what we're seeing is a convergence of the logical or virtual security and cybersecurity and traditional safety and physical security. So with digital transformations and with important sectors that have traditionally been air-gapped from the internet, for example, that are now enabling themselves digitally, as a lot of critical infrastructure is in energy, for example, with regards to utility, electrical, or water, etc., or the nuclear industry, for example. Then we're seeing this. So one of the things I noticed in the UK, which is often, one of the top two in the cybersecurity indexes in terms of advanced, along with America, the most advanced cybersecurity, is that the mature organization, the CISO roles there, for example, and the cybersecurity teams are converging and becoming not only separate in terms of information security, they are coming under one title, one function, and that convergence is a trend that we're seeing happening again in mature societies and mature industries.
Asif Sahab, what do you think that why financial sector is or should be declared as, although I mean it's no brainer that financial sector is a critical infrastructure for any nation, but what is it that the nation relies on the banks to, I mean, if they don't get the cash, if the funds are not available, so what are the services that it provides that it should be declared as a critical infrastructure? And from cybersecurity point of view, what do you think, where do we stand as far as financial industry is concerned?
Thank you, Asif. I think in the context of prevention of critical national infrastructure, the key thing is, I think something that we have talked about in the morning also, is to have a national cybersecurity ecosystem in place. With the number and sophistication of cyber attacks on the rise, and we are seeing this number increasing exponentially, only collaboration among industry participants as well as private and public institutions, both domestically as well as internationally, can ensure resilience in the financial system. If you talk about the financial sector, I think financial sector is one of the key contributor to preventing the critical national infrastructure because it contributes very heavily to that. But at the same time, it's a vice versa situation. I think the industry ecosystem has to support that. In US, we basically see that there is an FSISEC body, which is the Financial Services Information Sharing and Analysis Center, which is an industry collaboration body. And this sector basically creates a parallel organization for high-level incident response and policy coordination. The key objectives of such a body is automated sharing of cybersecurity information, regulatory harmonization of risk-based approach, additional regulation of third-party service providers, and continuous exercises and work on sector-wide plan for recovery and response. Uh, if we take example of US in 2013, White House had issued an executive order to improve critical infrastructure, cybersecurity to drive cyber-related industry efforts. They had mandated to identify critical infrastructure which could affect public health on safety, economic activity, and national security. Subsequently, financial institutions were also made part of it. I think one of the other important elements is having cybersecurity related exercises across public and private sectors. That's one of the very important elements that we need to look at because unless we don't test ourselves, where do we stand, we won't know where we are and how to improve upon ourselves. In the same context, I think cyber, we talked about cyber academia in the earlier part of the conference, that it has an equal and important role to play in having the appropriate workforce at the national level, both in the financial sectors and other sectors, to basically support these initiatives. One of the other important aspects is obviously the awareness level of a common man. And that also is very key factor. I think we talked about the human element throughout the conference. And it's very important that we have appropriate awareness mechanisms for common man with the financial systems basically coming into play, a lot of financial services being rolled out, which is being, the common man is the final user of that. I think the awareness levels have to be dealt with at the national level. And to sum about, I think governance body at national level as well as policy sector-wide strategy we have talked about. And like I said at the start, I think a mutual sector ecosystem has to be there in order to move us forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Asif. Shafiq, what is your point of view that because as I just mentioned that UK has 13 sectors as critical, US has 18 sectors as critical. So when we have those many, a dozen or more sectors declared as critical, so what else is remain? What else is non-critical then? So because the objective of designating a sector as critical network infrastructure, the objective is that you can focus your cybersecurity efforts or information security efforts more towards those critical essential services. But when we have dozen or 2 dozen sectors as critical, so how many sectors are left which are not critical? What is your take on this?
Okay, so Assalamu alaikum to everybody. Thank you very much. I apologize for being on the road earlier. Just finished namaz and had to move off to another location. And so, bearing in mind that we are talking about critical infrastructure, firstly, Singapore, as an example, has 11 critical infrastructure defined, right? And in other countries, you have obviously different sectors. I look at these as nomenclatures, categorizations. You see, in my line of business, being a guy coming out of the forensics incident response perspective, I'm looking at what was the reason we classified these to begin with, right? What was the whole purpose behind it, you know? So I'm looking at the threat actor-centric perspective, right? We used to classify things like nation state, financially motivated threat actors. You see, this is going to be a convergence. I can name you nation states which are financially motivated today. So the advancement of different threat actors has led us to have to redefine our position in how we do classification. It just makes it easier when we start classifying financial institutions, government infrastructure, and so on and so forth, OT infrastructure. But you see, critical infrastructure will depend on your demographic, on your country, right? In Singapore, we don't have agriculture per se, but if you look at Indonesia, they have a whole entirety of OT systems dedicated to infrastructure. They have petrochemical and so on and so forth, just as an example to differentiate different countries. It's all about positioning. Your question being, what about those which are not deemed critical infrastructure? Well, I say that in all aspects, this is important because, the nature of how data is being stolen today, we've just seen hits being had from not only data centers, but also e-commerce. How do you make a point classification on that when an old lady has just recently lost her entire life savings? Would that be considered critical in the eyes of the government? You can't really put a classification per se. It's under commercial. So in my take of it, it's about we have to reevaluate as a country definitions, of why we presented it in such a manner. It's to do a point focus. It's to understand different sectors have different requirements, like OT. But I think one has to ask oneself, like OT infrastructure today, right? There are point focus type of attacks directly to OT infrastructure and also via IT to get across to the OT infrastructure, and even ransomware to OT infrastructure. The dynamics are constantly changing, and I think governments need to adapt to these nomenclatures in accordance with the threat actor.
So it means,
And now,
sorry to interrupt you, it means you are trying to say that anything, any infrastructure or any entity against which there are threat actors, persistent threat actors who are trying to target that industry, uh, irrespective that whether you've declared it as critical, it becomes critical because somebody who is trying to attack, so you have to protect it. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, in essence, yes, because of the dynamics of how it has been changed, how the status quo has been changed. In the past, it was pretty clear cut if you are a nation state threat actor or you are a financially motivated threat actor. But today, what we have seen, there is a convergence I see based on these elements, and that's why I'm saying we should take a look overarching how we start defining these because they are going across and spanning across these things, these sectors per se.
Uh, Coming back to the point that Amar Jafri Saab mentioned, that moving forward, all the industries, whether they are manufacturing or their supply chain, or I mean, they're moving towards Internet of Things, industrial Internet of Things, and then there is this Industrial Revolution 4.0. So when we have this in place, so it means, does it mean, it's a question, and to everybody, including Jafri Saab, it means that any entity which is producing some goods or providing some services which are so much, on which the society is so much dependent, so that company or that sector will move towards IR 4.0 for their survival and IoT. So in that case, it means that if we have to protect any infrastructure, so we have to develop the capability in IR 4.0 and IoT. So is it good to sum up that securing IR 4.0 and IoT infrastructure is going to be the cornerstone to have right protections in place?
Okay. Asif, I would like to start that it's a defining moment for Pakistan. Let me tell you very frankly. On the same stage I have been talking on the last 20 years, I believe. Today is a defining moment for Pakistan from the cybersecurity perspective. There's an old saying that problem well defined is half solved. Today, I would like all of you listening to me that we should define the industrial security today. How why it is important, how it is important. Second point I would like to say is that we can't stop it now. It has to come. It has to come. The maximum we can do is fix it or face it. So, as a brave nation, we should face it now. For those who have a little understanding of IR 4.0, there are 4 domains in which we have to work. And this has already been done. We're not going to reinvent anything. Already been done. Choice is that how we do localize it. This is very important. Again, it's very important to localize it. The first stage is when raw material come to the industry. And this applies to every industry, let me say very frankly. So now the quality control check as per international standards is through IR 4.0 standards now. Azhar Sahib is sitting here, he's expert on that, and he's organizing a course, that is a free course. Trust you me, he has been very kind to me. And he is doing a 1-week course starting from, I believe, 1st of December. And everybody sitting here must join that course. And I will also join that course. So the first stage is quality control of the raw material coming to the industry as per international standard. That is very important. Second is the manufacturing itself. That is very clear. Third is supply chain. For supply chain, let me tell you one thing. You rightly said, Asif, it affects every industry. Every industry. Because, let me give you an example. If some pharmaceutical company has a big supply chain and there is some stuff which needs to be under controlled environment for a certain period of time, and there's a breakdown of the vehicle, and its refrigerating system goes down. So there must be some system. You know, now those tags have come now, which will tell the customer that this bottle remained out of its defined limits of temperature from this hour to this hour. The moment that bottle will go to the shop, which is very important. So it's an issue. So third stage is supply chain automation under IR 4.0, and fourth and very important is the user response. Without user response, you cannot run your industry. So all these 4 vectors, I must say, are well defined now. It has got standards under IR 4.0. But the irony is, what we did in the cybersecurity for the last 15 years, we are doing the same now. We have been, me and Azhar Sahib have been to Gujranwala, we have been to Sialkot. There's a less appetite for spending money on learning these things. Ladies and gentlemen, the era of awareness is gone now. Trust you me. I hate this word awareness now. It is an era of learning now. How will you learn? You will learn through cyber drills. You will learn through cyber ranges. I'm sharing with a lot of pain. Sufyan is sitting here. He issues invitation to people to attend our cyber drills free. Free, let me tell you. We spend money on the logistics. Nobody comes. Why? There's no appetite. But now, the danger bell has already rung. I'm very happy. Trust you me. Today, I do not have 5 minutes to talk to anybody irrelevant because I'm so busy. But it's our call. Call for the senior people now. Without blaming anybody, any organization, this is my request to all of you. Don't blame anybody. टांग मत पकड़ें उसकी, उसका हाथ पकड़ें प्लीज, उसकी मदद करें निकलने के लिए. हम एज ए नेशन डेंजर में हैं, हम एज ए ऑर्गेनाइजेशन डेंजर में नहीं है. लेट मी टेल यू, ऑर्गेनाइजेशन निकाल लेती है अपने आप को डेंजर से. नेशंस एज ए नेशन डेंजर में है. हमारे जो मुखालफीन हैं, जो दोज हू वांट टू फिनिश अस एज ए कंट्री, एज ए नेशन, Trust you me, they are very organized. They are spending billions of dollars. It's your call. Thank you.
Means that we should have some, after we have defined that this is a critical network infrastructure or this sector is critical. So I would like to have a feedback from the panelist that do we have already some pre-existing standards or frameworks for protecting critical network infrastructures? And if those frameworks are available, how can Pakistan use them? As Asif mentioned that there is a some financial regulatory body in the US. So have they defined any frameworks which can be used and tailored according to the needs of the country? And not just in financial sector, what about the other sectors? Because those standards or frameworks have to be generic enough to be implemented in any sector. Inam, Asif,
So
whoever,
Asif,
yeah.
yeah. Asif, I think FSISEC is a body which is obviously it's primarily focusing on the financial industry, but financial services. But we need to. I mean, the reason why I mentioned about FSISEC was that even in Pakistan, even we don't have that kind of a body. And like I said, these kind of bodies have to be cross-sector, and there has to be a cross-sector collaboration between such bodies. So it is not just a matter of laying down guidelines; it's actual collaboration. And like Amar Saab also mentioned, I think the key is in execution. We need to have execution now. I mean, we've passed that stage that we need to plan it in so much detail. Yes, we need to definitely plan, but I think the key is in the execution. And that is where we need to have those bodies at the national level where, I mean, it has to be driven from somewhere. It can't be driven from the bottom. It can't be driven by any sector. It has to be driven at the national level. And that's why it's important to have that drive right from the top, and then have those bodies which basically are cross-sector bodies which come together and collaborate in all sorts of initiatives, be it policy making, be it threat industry, threat level sharing, be it development of academia, be it cyber exercises that Amar Saab just mentioned. I think this has to be driven at the national level, and I think that should be the key takeaway from this panel as well as the conference.
Yes, Asif, thank you. And by when you're saying that national level, so it means that it has to, let me put it more openly, it has to come from the Prime Minister office or from the President office. You cannot have a body of cross-sectional body from NEPRA or OGRA or PTA or State Bank and the representative coming together and sitting together unless we have the Prime Minister office or the President office heading all these initiatives, and I think that's how other countries have done. Inam, the quickly,
And absolutely,
sorry.
Asif, I would just like to add that as part of this digital Pakistan vision that we are seeing, it has to be a very essential part of cybersecurity. Has to be very essential part of that whole program. So you're right. I mean, it has to be driven from there.
Right. Inam, do you want to add anything on the frameworks and the standards for CNI in 1 minute, please? Because
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I completely agree with Amar Shah, and thanks Asif for your input as well. Yes, there are US based standards as well. As Amar really pointed out, it's about, we have passed the awareness thing. It's about adoption. It's about getting along on the best practices. We have got US NERP, CIP, critical infrastructure protection standard. We have got capability maturity model standard for electricity subsector for the area of gas. So, and it's purely based on cybersecurity. Take care of all the essential domains that is required, comparable to the NIST standard. So you name it, we have those best practices and guidelines in place. So all we really missing is like tone at the top. We have to start this. We have to adopt this. And of course, as being us being at this level, CISOs, we can play our own role, definitely. But besides that, it has to come through a regulatory body, it has to come through a government to enforce those standards as well. So that's my take. Thank you.
Shafiq and Habib, do you want to add some last words in 30 seconds, please?
So we've got
Yeah,
FSI,
sure.
the working right group, FSISAC, OTISAC, RHISAC. There are many standards out there. There's the Americans with the NIST standard, and even the UK, you have a few other standards. I think we shouldn't be too caught up with the standards, but I agree with the gentleman what they have mentioned. It takes a higher body of authority that has regulatory mandates that can allow for this to be effective from the top down, because there are regulatory elements at play at every single step of the way.
Yeah, nobody needs to reinvent the wheel. I listed 8 international standards on a slide in my talk. It was Pakistan's ranked in global cybersecurity index at 94 out of 174 nations.
Yeah.
There are 93 nations, that means, that Pakistan can look at, see how move its cybersecurity forward. And there are many common things that happen. Some of it's been mentioned. That tone at the top is absolutely important. You know, publishing a nationwide cybersecurity strategy, mandatory regulatory requirements like they have in Europe with the NIST directive, establishing a government authority or a committee to oversee CNI, establishing a centre of excellence like the National Cybersecurity Centre in the UK, government collaborating with academia, universities and research and development centres, public with the private sector, and also collaborating with international partners like Turkey and other common countries where you can share resources, share intelligence, share experience. These are all tried and tested approaches to improving the maturity of your cybersecurity culture nationwide.
Thank you very much, Habib, and all the panelists. Inamullah Siddiqui from K Electric. By the way, K Electric is that distribution company in the country. They have telemetry already in place. They have few 100,000 meters or maybe more than that, collecting the meter readings via telcos. So, Inam, thank you very much, and Mr. Habib Khan, thank you as well for giving a very enlightened presentation earlier. And Asif Menai from Habib Bank, thank you for keeping on sponsoring this event and being available no matter what the situation is. So nice of you for your support. And of course, Shafiq Dawood from Group IB, hope to see you soon in Pakistan. And then obviously Amar Jafri Saab. जी please Amar Saab.
मेरा ख्याल है हम सब ने मिलकर पिछले 10 सालों में कौम को नमाज सिखा दी है. अब गवर्नमेंट वजू कराए शुरू कर देगा. मैं ओपनली बात कर रहा हूँ आपसे. देखें, ये जो कोविड का वाक़या हुआ है, जितनी जल्दी हमने अडॉप्ट किया है, आज की कॉन्फ्रेंस सबूत है इस बात का कि कितने लोग बाहर से बोल रहे हैं. यानी कोई चीज़ रुकी नहीं है. ये बहुत बड़ी एक रियल लाइफ एग्जांपल दे रहा हूँ मैं इस वक्त आपको, रियल लाइफ. बस मैंने कहा है ना, जो मुझे बात समझ में आई है, हम सब ने मिलकर 10-15 सालों में कौम को नमाज़ पढ़नी सिखा दी है. गवर्नमेंट वजू कराए और नमाज पकड़ा कर दे. थैंक यू मच.
जी, मैं यही कहने लगा था कि जाफी साहब का तो शुक्रिया अदा नहीं करना चाहिए. ये तो इनका ही इवेंट है, इनके ही सारे इवेंट्स रहे हैं. और मैं भी पहले इनसे मुलाकात भी 2002 या 3 में एक इवेंट में ही हुई थी. तो थैंक यू सर फॉर ऑल योर tireless efforts for the last so many decades.